Henvey Inlet First Nation is a signatory on the Robinson-Huron Treaty, established in 1850, but for time immemorial, my people have been occupying these lands. The First Nation was dependent on government funding to survive. Moving forward in the future, I didn't want that for our community. I wanted the band to self-sustain itself. My vision for the project was to bring autonomy, self-governance to the First Nation, infrastructure, health services, all those good things that we're lacking in. The premise is we had to give up something to move forward. Community takes real ownership of the lands. They don't like to see anything that's intrusive.
That was something that we as a people really struggled with. How do we impact the land that has sustained us for thousands of years?
I remember when I started back here in November of 2017, there was nothing around, there's no roads. They had surveyors come in, marking roads out, turbine pads, and that's when we started coming around then.
The community went through a very detailed process of trying to decide whether or not the long-term impacts of installing an industrial-scale wind farm would be acceptable.
There were a lot of folks that were fearful that their land would be disturbed, and rightfully so, absolutely.
We still live off the land we harvest. There's medicines that we use for healing properties and ceremonies. As soon as you stick a shovel in the ground, you've impacted the land.
We started out with the environmental assessment process to help the community understand what kind of impacts this project would have on the wildlife, the water, the vegetation.
If we were to proceed with wind farm development, we would have to develop one of the most rigorous environmental stewardship regimes in the industry.
Henvey Inlet First Nation, because they're under the First Nations Lands Management Act, they are able to create their own land laws, which really opens up so many doors.
From that, we realized Henvey could become its own environmental protection agency.
In order to do that, the community felt that external support was required to ensure the highest levels of environmental protection.
Savanta were retained as a commissioner. They're neutral to the actual project and the ban. When issues arise with species at risk, issues with habitat, we all work together to remedy those issues when they arise.
Henvey engaging us on this project, we've been able to provide skills and training, job opportunities that band members and adjacent First Nation communities may not have had the opportunity to get involved in this line of work.
We have to treat the entire site as energized, whether the turbines are spinning or not. Our site today will be down the Henvey Inlet. We will be doing water sampling.
We're out there every day and we are protecting the traditional land of the Henvey Inlet First Nation.
Having our own community members out there as abatement officers, that allowed for us to better understand industry standards and allowed industry to understand expectations from an Indigenous perspective.
Well, each day I teach them something, and other days they teach me something. They're knowledgeable about what's going on the job site, and I'm pretty knowledgeable about stuff in the field.
As far as finding work is concerned, there hasn't been a whole lot around here, and so it's creating jobs, and it's keeping everybody employed.
They're shadowing the biologists, and eventually they'll take on those positions, and they'll look after the First Nation on our behalf.
The key environmental challenges were to address the number of species at risk.
Places where snakes and turtles will hibernate over the winter. A lot of the constructions, they push roads right through them. So there was a lot of companies coming to try and mitigate the damage to the environment.
The whole reason why Henvey Inlet hired Savanta is so the land and the wildlife can be monitored.
Did you see any snakes last week? Was it pretty warm out?
Oh, last week, yeah, I seen 2 rattlesnakes, or Massasauga rattlesnakes.
Generally speaking, when there are construction projects, there will be inevitable disturbances.
For a project of this scale, it is not simple, especially in an environment like this that's so sensitive with so many species at risk.
What type of recovery strategies would we put in place to repopulate or reintroduce those particular species, whether they would be on our lands or another region within Northern Ontario?
These are snappers. We'll be releasing over 100 today.
All right, Beans, you ready to go?
lot of land disturbance happening, so we decided to remove them from all sites that are very vulnerable to nest destruction, bring them into our incubation center, and then bring them back to where they came from to help restore those populations.
First time really seeing wind turbines. It's amazing.
I don't feel conflicted anymore. At the beginning, I thought maybe it's going to be difficult for us to hunt, but it turns out our wildlife on our reserve is being taken care of.
Every day I go out there, I see moose tracks, deer tracks. Halfway through the construction, you could barely see any of them. Now that it's near completion, all kinds of wildlife are coming back.
You still see wildlife out there. Been hunting since I was little and trapping partridge, moose, deer. This turkey's starting to come around. Probably try that this year.
It's online. The construction is virtually done now. It's been 12 years in the making. To finally see it realized is momentous for the First Nation.
The funding that comes from this project gives the community the opportunity to build out the vision that they have for their long-term future.
This area right here is going to be the recreation center. Here's where the gymnasium will sit in this area. And then it's also going to have a large pool in it. There's also going to be a permanent sweat lodge. Area for sacred fire will be there.
They should be applauded for all of the hard work that they've done and how unique this situation is.
From the community's perspective, now it's time for recovery when it comes to the land. We've been sustained by these lands. We have an obligation to these lands to ensure that coexistence.
What our leadership of the current day is doing is setting the stage for that next generation. 20 years down the line, they have a nest egg to govern themselves at, and the band doesn't have to rely on government funding. It's all dependent on the wind.